Tomahawks and shadows of empire, how Russian television explains Europe to itself. Moscow studios are once again talking about the sensation. Kyiv is preparing a large-scale offensive. Trump is hosting Zelensky. And now the fate of Europe is being decided. 1,000 Tomahawks are at stake. So begins the latest episode of the Russian program 60 Minutes, the flagship mouthpiece of state propaganda, where news is presented as both a battle report and a prophecy. At first glance, it's a familiar set of topics: the US, Ukraine, NATO, the threat of nuclear escalation. But if you listen closely, it becomes clear. It's no longer so much about Ukraine as about Europe, which in Russia is seen as a frightened spectator. Russian television is once again telling us how it wants to see us, dependent on Washington, tired, insecure, and at the same time, weak-willed witnesses to someone else's great power game. 1. Missiles as a metaphor for fear. The main focus of the episode is Tomahawks. These American cruise missiles become a universal symbol on air. Skabiva and the studio guests talk not about ballistics or military logic, but about the fact itself. Every missile is a step toward nuclear catastrophe. The numbers multiply. From 20 to 50, then 1,000 are needed. Then this will shift the conflict to a different plane. It's all a theatre of threats, structured according to a clear pattern. 1. Ukraine is asking. That means it's provoking. 2. The US is discussing. That means it's preparing a strike. 3. Europe is supporting. That means it's guilty. The rhetoric is simple and as old as the Cold War. Any Western action is aggression. Any Russian action is a response. This allows them to maintain moral superiority in the eyes of their domestic audience and convince their foreign audiences, it all depends on you, don't irritate Moscow. But there's a more subtle meaning behind this. Russia no longer claims victory. It's trading on fear. Its television isn't trying to convince, but to weaken it, to replace confidence with fatigue and strategy with nervousness. 2. Trump decides everything, the old myth of strongmen. The second pillar of the narrative is Donald Trump. He's simultaneously a peacemaker, Erdogan's friend, the man who stopped 8 wars, and a potential Tomahawk supplier. The studio speaks of him with admiring exasperation, as an unpredictable player on whom everything depends. This isn't just a story about the US. It's an attempt to rewrite geopolitics according to rules Russia understands. For Russian television logic, the world isn't a network of institutions, but a collection of leaders with personal likes and dislikes. Putin and Trump understand each other. Europe is a notorium of the weak. China and India are bargaining. This is how a mythology is created in which international law does not exist, and diplomacy is replaced by intonation. This is convenient. If strong men decide everything, then Russia can always claim that it is one too. For European viewers, this narrative contains a hidden message. You are weak. You don't have the likes of Trump or Putin. You are dependent on the will of others. But this very idea reveals Russia's own deep insecurity. In the 21st century, strength is measured not by the number of missiles, but by the ability to build alliances, produce technology, and ensure predictability. And this is precisely where Moscow has long been losing. Hello, our dear friends and comrades. Hello. Your favorite program, 60 Minutes, is live, hot on the heels. We'll start with breaking news and sensational events. Kyiv is preparing a large-scale offensive on the front lines. Trump announced this, revealing the agenda for tomorrow's meeting with Zelensky in Washington. The American president has allegedly not yet decided whether to help Ukraine. The Ukrainian delegation has already held closed consultations at the White House. Prime Minister of Ukraine, Yermak, Zelensky's chief of staff, and the head of the National Security and Defense Council, American citizen Umerov, met with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, whom Yermak flatteringly called the chief architect of American foreign policy. The talks were held in strict secrecy. In addition to meeting with Trump, Zelensky's agenda also includes a visit to Congress and talks with representatives of defense and energy companies. 3. Ukraine as a mirror of fear. Skabiva repeats the thesis of a large-scale offensive, of secret negotiations in the White House, of a war that has lasted 3 years. Ukraine is described as a puppet controlled from overseas, and its leadership as obedient Americans by passport. This narrative is needed to depersonalize Ukraine and deprive it of the right to make its own decisions. If Kyiv isn't a subject, then Europe isn't an ally, but merely a tool in Washington's hands. But reality stubbornly defies this scenario. Ukraine hasn't collapsed, hasn't capitulated, hasn't lost its political system, and continues reforms, even under fire. This resilience irritates the Kremlin system, and so, on television, it's transformed into homework before Trump's visit. Supposedly, Ukraine isn't living its own life, but following someone else's instructions. But the real dependence lies with Russia itself. Its rhetoric now exists only in the opposition. Without the West, without Ukraine, without an enemy, there's nothing to talk about. You were on the program Empire of Lies. See you soon.